Hey guys, so let's do a real quick park. We're going to draw a little park with a little fence and a little sidewalk and a little garden and a couple trees. We're going to do some cool things. We're going to do some round objects here inside this isometric thing. We don't have to be limited to just square shapes. So I'm going to start off by drawing my little diamond shape here just for my little chunk of land that I'm going to be using. And just double check that I've got everything lined up right with the direct select tool here. So that looks about lined up correctly, but it should be down one. That's probably good. Oh, maybe one more. Now this looks good, this looks good. This needs to be up one. There we go, cool. And I'll just make this a bit bigger. Just make sure everything's touching our grid so we can keep that locked in. All right, and I'll just click off this. I'm making this green, just I want it to be grassy. And I'll make a little wall on this side here. And I'll make it a bit darker. And then I'll just get my transform, reflect, and make a copy, and I'll just drag this over here, and I'll make sure this is a bit darker. Now I'm going to get my direct select tool and just double check that everything's sort of locked onto the grid. So I'll just drag this in, drag this guy here, drag this guy here. Make sure these guys are all right. Oops. All right, so one by one, I'll just link those together. Okay, looks good. And then we'll do the same thing over here. Get this all locked in. All right, looks good. Okay, control semicolon to see what it looks like with that. Okay, good. That's fun. All right, so let's get in. We'll draw a little sidewalk here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to draw like a little sidewalk that's kind of going across, be like the different things. But I'm going to end it with like a little circular kind of cutout sidewalk here. So I'm going to draw a little diamond in the middle of the park here. So right about here, I'll color it gray, the color of maybe like a dove gray, the color of a sort of a weathered sidewalk. Make sure it's sort of in the center here. Let's actually just double click on this and we'll center this like so. That's good. That's about centered. Okay, we can center it. That's good. And what we'll do is we'll just get our direct select tool and just hold down. We'll just click on one of the corners and hold down Shift click on the other corner. And I want to round these corners off until they get into right about here, like maybe right about into the second line from the edge. And I'll do the same thing. I'll click on the top corner, hold down Shift, click on the bottom corner, and drag these down until they meet. And so now we have this little kind of circle shape here. We can offset this path by, say, for instance, -10, or maybe even -12 or 15 or so. That's really good. And then we'll just hold down Shift, click both of these, and then minus front. And with that done, we have this little kind of shape in the middle. If it's not perfect, it's okay. Well, it's looking, it's pretty good, right? And we'll go in with our pen tool. We'll click on this this shape here, and we'll just create a little series of sidewalks that kind of go in and out. And we can even, for instance, here we'll just go straight through it and then click around it to make a little sidewalk that leads from the outside to that like right there. And we'll do the same thing over here. Sidewalk that goes here. All right, and then one more, maybe two more. Okay, then one more here. Looks about right. All right, good, cool. All right, so we'll draw. Now we'll make a little gate here. We'll make a little kind of like gate that kind of shows up above the fence here, or above this little sidewalk. So I'm gonna draw a little circle here, and I'm just gonna make sure it fits in. Well, I'll just a little circle here. I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to go transform and shear. I'm going to shear it -30 degrees on the vertical axis here. And I'll press OK. And then what we'll do is we'll just double check that this sort of fits into our grid. We want it to line up pretty well. So just double check that that's lined up on both sides. And then we'll get our pen tool and we'll draw a little rectangle that kind of goes below it like so. So it creates this little door shape here, and we'll just link these together by hitting unite, and then I'll offset this path one more time, and I'll offset it by, say, for instance, 12 points or so. Let's see what it looks like. Okay, and then we can just sort of minus front and create this little door shape here. And then from here, what we can do is we can create a little other shape, just a random shape that sort of goes underneath this little bottom part here, and just minus front, just to have this sort of portal kind of shape hanging out. And we'll make this a bit darker so it distinguishes itself from the sidewalk. And we'll just drag it on top of our garden and just shrink it down to size here. So we can just make this, even though it's like kind of fitting in with everything else, we'll just shrink it down. I'm just gonna have it sort of hanging out here. And we can nudge it a little bit. Looks good. And we'll just alt drag this to the other side. Alt drag. Have one here. And then we'll grab out, click on this, and just right click on it and say transform, reflect. Copy that and just drag this guy over here. And we'll alt drag this guy, put him over here. Okay, like that. Now let's make a little fence that will kind of link all this together here. In order to make this fence, I want to make sort of a rounded shape for the fence. I want to make this fence be a little less square. I don't want it to be so blocky like a Minecraft thing. I want it to be a little more visible on like a three-dimensional thing. So I'm going to draw a little rectangle here, or a little circle here. I'm going to go to my fill. I'm going to choose a gradient, and I'm going to go to my gradient options. I'm going to make it from a linear to a radial, and I'm going to go from say for instance light gray to, say, a dark gray. And then I'm going to get my gradient tool here. I'm going to see if I can't drag it off to the corner to make it look as if it's sort of pointing, it's sort of like gathering light from one side. I can sort of rotate that around. And that way I'll have this sort of shining little kind of sphere, as it were. And then with the same deal with my rectangle, I'm going to draw a rectangle here. I'm going to get my grid back. I'm going to draw a little rectangle below it, which is M on the keyboard. I'll just draw a little rectangle here, and I'll just change my gradient from, say, for instance, radial to linear, and that way it'll look as if it's like a sort of a tube that has its own sort of depth to it. If you kind of take a look at that, you can kind of see the illusion we're going for. In this case, what I'll do is I'll click on this, and I'll get my pen tool, and I'll add a point here. I'll just drag it down slightly, and then I'll round it off. And that way we have this little rounded off kind of post, as it were. So I'll just grab this, I'll group this together, Control G on the keyboard, and we'll get my grid back, and we'll just put this over here, maybe on this corner, and we'll shrink it down real good. Okay, and we'll just alt drag this over here. I'll drag this over here. I'll drag this over here. Neato. And then we'll see if we can make a little series of sort of posts that will create a fence. So I'm just going to get in real close here, and I'm just going to click on follow down this line here, like so, and I'll just make a stroke here. I'll get the fill off, and I'll just make a stroke that's sort of gray. I'll make it kind of a gray shape here. And we can even get a stroke kind of here and fill that in. We can even just round off the caps to it and just make sure it's sort of hidden beneath this here shape, and we'll just sample that color. Once again, make sure it's rounded. So now we have this sort of rounded off look to it. In fact, what we can do here is we can even just go to Object, Path, and then Outline Stroke, and then just sample this and here. All right, and then from there, what we can do is we can just Alt drag this, and then Control D to kind of duplicate that down. So we'll just make sure this everything sort of stays on a line. All right, so we can see what we're looking at here. That's kind of fun. All right, so we'll just get in closer, select all this, and then we'll group this together. And we can just Alt drag this down here. It looks like we're a little off center. That's fine. We'll just click on this guy and pull him together. And we could even take this whole group, right click on it, transform, reflect, copy it, and drag this over here. And we'll just double check that everything is hitting the right perspective here. I'll just Alt Control and semicolon and just make sure that my post is hiding the edges of my fence. Cool. Let's double check that this guy right here, this gate is in front of everything. Control Shift and square bracket. All right, fun. And then we'll grab this, Alt drag it to the top corner here, the northwest corner. Double check this is below everything here. Once again, we're trying to obscure all these lines. So I'll hide this behind this. Okay. Make sure this is on top of everything. Same here. Alt drag all this. Get it close, make sure this is arranged where it needs to be. I'm hitting the Control button with the square brackets to manipulate all this. Make sure this is towards the bottom of our stack. All right, just about done. Okay, cool. All right, last thing we'll do is we'll create a couple trees to go in this park. So once again, same deal as before. We'll just create a big circle here, and we'll have our gradient. In this case, if you want to just just make sure that the little knob is the last thing you selected when you create, it'll create the same gradient. And we can actually just change this to, say for instance, like a green color and then a darker green color. So we can choose the same green here, but we'll just go over here to our HS or CMYK and sort of drag that down towards black. You'll make sure this is radial and make sure that our gradient tool has done all this. Great. Cool. And then once again, we'll create a little rectangle down here. Oops. And on the keyboard. Make sure it's rounded at the bottom. And then we'll make a gradient here that's going to be maybe, say, for instance, 2 shades of brown. So, go to our swatches. Dark brown, and we'll change it to linear, and say, for instance, dark brown, so it's easier to see. Okay, that's good. And we'll just double check that this is where it needs to be. We'll group these together. Make this a bit bigger. And we can just shrink this down to size. All right, neat. So we'll call this done. We'll just, you know, if you wanted to, say, for instance, put some little splashes of color here or there, maybe some apples in the trees or some flowers on the ground, that may be something you can do. But this is an example of how we can use round shapes to kind of add to our overall isometric, you know, kind of repertoire of shapes we can do. So we don't have to do just square stuff. All right, I'll just make this a bit bigger, pop it in the center of everything, and then we can put a little background color on it. So just don't leave it white, just put a background color on it in this case. I'll make it like maybe like a blue color here, and just make sure it's in the back. Or even maybe like a pinkish color. We can just, you can determine what you want. Orange is good too. I like that, that's good. All right, that's fun. Okay, cool. All right, neato. So once again, go to File, Export for Screens, and double check that you have this being saved as a JPEG. Name it something like, you know, Park Isometric, and turn it in as a JPEG. Very cool. Okay, we'll see you guys for doing. See you in class.